All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Tuesday, a slightly cold, rainy day. How are you two? Okay? Not too cold? Mm?
I'm wearing a lot of
You're
I'm like, I don't want to get cold.
no.
No.
The secret is layering. Lots of layers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll get well. It's not. It's not even cold. I think it's 11.
Yeah, today
So.
was really sick, so that's why I was like, myself up.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It'll get a little bit colder than this.
Yeah.
It's okay. We're tough though, right? You're both honorary Canadians now, so you can tough out the weather with us, right? Yeah. Um, so Kayla is here. Good morning, Kayla. And where are you? There you are. And Jesse's here. Good morning, Jesse. Um, okay, let's jump into where we were yesterday. So we were coming to the end of that little documentary with our friend Adam Pearson, right? And we talked about some of these questions yesterday. We were saying that, of course, Adam Pearson belongs to a lot of different social groups, right? In terms of his gender and sexuality and nationality and maybe religious background, his economic or social class, um, his ability status. He falls into a bunch of different groups, and most of those are actually dominant groups, right? Which is interesting because the fact that he falls into this group of people with disabilities has a pretty significant effect on his life, right? And again, one of the reasons why is that his the identification of him in that group is so visible, right? Like he cannot hide his face really, and so it's very recognizable to people. It's very easy for them to tell that belongs to this group, right? He has a very different face, right? Um, and so we see him kind of, going through life, and we hear his mom talking about it, and people look at him differently, right? People tend to take a second look, and to some extent that's understandable because he does have a very different face, right? So you kind of look twice when you catch him out of the corner of your eye, right? But his mom points out that she kind of gets frustrated when not when people look, because she knows that people are going to look at Adam a little bit longer than maybe someone else, but it's when they sort of like, hey man, turn around, you've got to see this, right? She doesn't like that, right? And that becomes disrespectful, right? But again, she knows people are going to look at him because he is different, right? But again, people do treat him a little differently. He feels that sometimes he gets treated as public property, right? Which kind of means that people don't have to treat him according to regular, they don't have to kind of use their manners, right? So sometimes they talk down to him, sometimes they, be overly nice to him, like, oh, I know you, man, I love you, come here, give me a hug, and, like, we don't like to hug people we don't know, or at least I don't. You can do as you like, but I don't like hugging people I don't really know. Um, and he kind of suffers these little kind of microaggressions or little kind of reminders that he is in this group, right? We talked a little bit about the law and hate crimes, and we didn't really define a hate crime yesterday, but we should probably do it now. And a hate crime is one that is motivated by um, someone's identity, right? The social groups that someone belongs to. So, if you punch Adam in the face because he's being a jerk to you, that's an assault, right? And that's against the law. But if you punch him in the face because he has a facial disfigurement and you don't like that, then that's a hate crime, right? You're injuring him based on the social group he belongs to, right? And you can't do that. Um, but we find out that in the documentary, we find out, of course, that there are different penalties depending on what type of hate crime you commit, right? And Adam goes out to that sort of seaside area to talk to that professor, Mark. something. I always forget their names. Goes to talk to Professor Mark, right? And Professor Mark says, actually, yeah, that what the little comment on your YouTube page is hate speech, and the police should have done something about that, right? And he says that it's a problem when you have groups of people that you're trying to protect in society, but you don't protect them equally, right? And that's what's happening here, is that people with disabilities are not protected to the same degree that religious minorities are, or people who are transgender, or gay or lesbian, or whatever. And we also saw him go to talk to a former Crown prosecutor to ask about sort of the court process for this kind of stuff, right? And the Crown prosecutor, or the former Crown prosecutor, he raised three issues, right? There was 3 issues that he raised. Do you remember what they were?
One was the police is embarrassed, they don't talk about it.
Yeah, one was police were kind of acting on their socialization, right? We're socialized not to kind of ask people about their disability, or not to kind of draw attention to it. And so sometimes police don't want to draw attention to it, right? But again, they need to, right? They need to ask if someone's disability was a factor in the crime, right? If it's being reported. That's the first one. Do you remember the second one?
I think it was about the court.
Mm-hmm.
Not sure.
Okay.
But it was about something about the court.
Yeah, it was about the court. Yeah, it had to do with the Crown prosecutor is who charges the person with the crime, right? And so if you want to convict someone of a hate crime, you actually have to charge them with a hate crime, right? And often it seems that Crown prosecutors are just charging people with assault, or a sort of a lower level offense, rather than a hate crime. And as I say, Adam and the Crown prosecutor don't point it out here, but again, for just to give these Crown prosecutors a bit of a break, it's difficult to prove intent, right? It's difficult to prove why someone did something, right? And again, most Crown prosecutors want to make sure that if they charge someone, that they convict them and they go to jail. And again, we had the example of you punching me in the face yesterday, right? And we can very easily prove that you punched me in the face. It's more difficult to prove why, right? And if you charge someone with a hate crime, you're saying they did this for this reason. And that's tricky to prove, right? We can much more easily prove that you punched me in the face, and so a lot of prosecutors will just charge people with that because it's easier to get them into jail. The intent is much more difficult to prove, right? But still, it's resulting in fewer people being charged with hate crimes, right? And as a result, do you remember the third part? No? The third part is that judges can't hand out longer sentences for hate crimes if someone's not actually charged with one, right? The judge can only, bless you, the judge can only sentence someone for the crime that they're charged with, right? And so if they're not charged with a hate crime, the judge can't sentence them as if it were a hate crime, right? So yeah, there's some laws in place here, but they're kind of unequal in places. Police aren't maybe asking the questions that they should. Crown prosecutors are a little shy about charging with hate crimes because they're more difficult to convict. And so as a result, we see that fewer people are actually punished for hate crimes, right? In the UK. We saw a little clip about, or right before we ended yesterday, we saw a little clip about Adam sort of going outside the movie theater and interviewing people, right? And they were saying that often the bad guy has some sort of disfigurement, right, or deformity, or somehow they're ugly, right? The hero is often beautiful in some way, right, and the villain is often ugly, right? And there's lots and lots of movie villains. Good morning.
Morning.
There's lots and lots of movie villains that fall into this category, right? And again, it's just movies, and they're silly stories, and Voldemort doesn't exist, although I shouldn't say his name. But
I didn't know
you didn't know what?
he didn't exist.
Well, we still shouldn't say his name. Don't you know Harry Potter?
I know, but I didn't watch the movies.
I've only watched the first 3 or 4. I'm working my way through. My partner loves them, and she read the books and saw the movies, and I've never read the books, but I'm working my way through. So movie 4 or 5 coming up. Maybe we should watch that. Maybe on the weekend or something. Anyway, right. So lots of movie bad guys are ugly or deformed or whatever, right? And again, it's just a story, right? It's just a movie, but it is part of our socialization, right? We're taught, don't judge a book by its cover, but we often do judge books by their cover, right? And again, we see it over and over again in film, where the bad guy is somehow, some sort of facial disfigurement, right? Or is ugly, right? And again, even the new Bond film that has just come out, even the villain in that movie has a facial disfigurement, right? He looks like I don't know if he's got burn scars on his face or what it is, but yeah, even right up to today we see that. So, the point we're at now is Adam is going to participate in a kind of a little psychological test to see, to sort of see how people's prejudices work, and if he can kind of overcome those prejudices or change them, right? So that's kind of where we are right now. Are there any questions or things that people want to say before we jump back in and start watching? No? Are we all good with Adam? Yeah? Okay.
Oh, when was the is that a movie documentary?
This documentary,
When
yeah.
it
When?
Yeah.
I think it's 2015? Let me just look here.
Is it like recent or?
Yeah. Let's see. 2015.
Oh.
Yeah. So I know that's not that recent for you, but for people who are a little bit older, it is.
Oops.
That's pretty recent. And the movie that Adam is in there, Under the Skin, with Scarlett Johansson, that's 2013. That's 2013. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. So for online people here, let me just see where we are. Let's see where we are. We are at okay. So online people were at 37 minutes and 39 seconds. And so we're going to watch from 37:39 all the way to the end, okay? So online people, the questions and the link are still in Microsoft Teams, so I'll let you go find that and do that. Yeah, so we'll watch the rest of the documentary, and then we'll come back to try to answer these last few questions, okay? So see you in just a little bit. Thank you, Adam. Let's see here. Put this on the screen. Right. So the psychological test. What happens in this? What happens in this test? What are they doing?
See how people think about this people with like disability and social disability.
Right. So they're trying to measure people's prejudice towards people with facial disfigurements. And how do they do it? How do they measure that?
I think they shoot the pictures of the people with the facial disfigurement.
Yeah, they show them pictures, and usually they'd probably ask them a question or something, and it would be kind of these kind of psychological tests are usually designed, and the people going into them usually don't know what they're being tested on, right? And so again, I'm not sure what the question was. I tried to catch it on the screen when it came up, but I missed it. But yeah, they're trying to measure people's prejudice, and at the beginning, what do they find? They do the test once, and then
Most people were like the percentage was high.
yeah, it was higher. All right.
They reviewed my awkward.
Say that one more time.
I mean, like look down.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, they had a prejudice towards people with facial disfigurements, right? And I wanted to kind of highlight this for you because most people were like, "Oh, I didn't realize that, right? I didn't know that I had this feeling, right? Or I didn't know I, was acting on these ideas, right?" And so that was one of my points about socialization earlier, is that we absorb these things, and then often we don't really realize that they're there, right? And we don't really realize that we're acting on them. And so we heard a few people who participated in the test. They said the same thing. They looked at their score and they're like, "Oh, I had no idea I was doing this, right? I had no idea that I had some sort of, prejudicial idea toward people with facial disfigurements," right? So, yeah, we do the test once and we see that the scores are reasonably high for most people. Then we go downstairs and meet Adam, right? The world's worst Jenga player. It's not fair. So they go and meet him, right? They talk to him, ask him questions and things. And what's the result of that meeting? What do they then do?
The percentage of how the people felt about people with like disabilities, it decreased.
Yeah, they kind of do the test again, right? And again, I'm not quite sure how this works, but again, you can't fake the answers to this one. But again, people's level of prejudice goes down, right? Which makes sense, because that article that we read, I guess last week or so, that talked about prejudice, one of the things they suggested is that you have to get people of different groups kind of interacting with each other, right? You need to get them kind of working in some sort of context together, right? And here we have, they're having a conversation, but they're also playing a game, right? And again, the psychologist points out that this is a small test. There's just a few people. It's only an hour. It's not much, but still, they can have a pretty significant effect just spending some time with Adam, right? And so, what does he decide to do as a result of that test? He decides to get a puppy. Yeah, which is kind of a strange, I guess. It's a bit of a left turn, maybe. But what's his thinking? Yeah, and what can he do while he's making people laugh? Yes, but so he can make people laugh while he's telling jokes and things like that. But what's he also doing at the same time?
Get people more aware about the disabilities and facial disfigurement issues.
Yeah, right. He's making people more aware, and he's trying to reduce prejudice, right? And I think, again, I think that this documentary is an excellent example of that as well, right? Because, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I suspect that when we first started watching this documentary a couple days ago, it was kind of like you see his face and you're like, whoa, right? And then after a while, you just kind of forget about it, right? You know it's different and you know how he looks, and then you kind of just start seeing him as a regular person, right? And he is, right? He's a very, he seems like a very normal guy to me. And the more time you kind of spend with him, the more you kind of forget about this thing that really, stood out at the beginning, right? Or took you off guard. And so, his idea of stand-up comedy to kind of introduce people to him and sort of reduce prejudice, that works. But I think the documentary kind of works as well, right? We all kind of got a chance to meet him, even though, he doesn't live here in Canada, but we all got a chance to meet him and spend an hour with him and just kind of see what he's like, right? And yeah, it's kind of, it's no big deal, but yeah, I don't know what I was going to say. Okay, last question before the break. So Adam decides he's going to embark on a career of stand-up comedy. So we've kind of identified how that is helpful, right? It can help reduce prejudice because people can kind of see him, right, and interact with him and hear what he has to say, right? And so yeah, they're going to interact with him. Okay, there's a few people looking at their phones, and I need you. Oh, okay. If you're looking at the questions, that counts. But if you're not, big trouble. So how is that not helpful, what he's doing? So it's certainly helpful for him to sort of get in front of people, make them laugh. That will probably reduce prejudice. But what kind of things, I guess maybe I'm going to change the question here. What kind of things does that not fix? Certainly, right? It doesn't change the fact that his face looks the way it looks, and I suspect that nothing will. He's gonna look like that for the rest of his life, right? What else does that not change? So he's trying to make a positive change, but what do his efforts not change? Yeah, right. He has a bit of a limited effect, right? He can only really reduce prejudice with people that he can actually interact with, right? And so he can't interact with everybody, although the documentary helps a little bit, but he can't interact with everybody. What other kind of things need to change to reduce prejudice against people with disabilities?
This is something that's like he grows with, so maybe like families have to teach their children to act normal when they see like
Yeah.
that they are normal people. So it is something that like you have to learn from your child.
Yeah.
So that's one.
Yeah,
That's
true.
one reason. That's one way we can like solve this problem.
Yeah, that's true, right? Is that social institutions have a role to play here, especially the family, right? Remember young Lucas? He met Lucas there in the school, and Lucas went to school and he has a bit of a facial disfigurement, and the kids were calling him all kinds of names, right? And he one of the things that Lucas said is that he was called Elephant Man, and Lucas was kind of upset because he was like, little kids don't know who the Elephant Man is, right? So where does that name come from, right? And he says it comes from parents, right? Parents are not doing a good job of teaching their kids to be accepting of people who are different, right? And so, you're right. Families have a job to do here in order to educate their kids and say, some people look different from us, and that's okay, right? They're people that deserve respect and kindness, right? Not name calling. What else? What else needs to be fixed? That's it? Well, we still have a law, right? We still have laws that are not either not perfectly used or not perfect.
Hate crime.
Yeah. Remember.
That also is related to, there's a law, but it is not like acting so efficiently because the people do not accept that kind of people, but they think that they are normal, so that's why they like removing that rule or law in their opinion. So there is a law,
Yeah.
but it is not efficient. It is not like, it doesn't.
Yeah, like it's not. Yeah, it's not perfect, right? It's certainly not. People are still committing hate crimes, even though hate crimes are illegal, right? Do you think the law should be stronger, or do you think it matters,
I
or?
think actually that people should change their point of view because this law will work at the time that people believe that, like people change their idea. So that's the time that you obey the law or do something about it,
Yeah.
judge something.
Yeah.
So whenever people are ready, their brain are ready to accept this fact. So that's the time that you can like say, yeah, it is efficient and it works. It is perfect.
Right.
But by own, like the law is law. You cannot do anything that law doesn't do anything that people do not accept.
Right. Yeah. So if people won't follow it, then yeah, you're just kind of throwing people in jail repeatedly, right, and not getting any change. Yeah.
Actually, that doesn't relate it to law, but related to
True. Very true. What do we say about the sentencing situation? Remember that little graphic with Adam being punched in the head? What was happening there?
Like they were showing that there were more hate crimes, like significantly more hate crimes towards race and religion than towards disability.
Yeah. And what about the punishments for those things?
Like it was like 6 months in jail, I think, for crime against this people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And then 2 years for hate crime.
Yeah. The sentencing guidelines are different, right? They're not
I
even.
think the other is like essential and more serious, but disability no.
Yeah, and like Professor Mark says in the documentary, that kind of sends the message that some people are not as important, right? It's more okay to hit a disabled person than it is to hit a person because of their race or religion or ethnicity or gender or sexual orientation or whatever, right? And again, is that the message we want to send, right? Is it more okay to do that than to commit a hate crime against a non-disabled person, right? Is that the message we want to send?
Should be offered.
Well, I think I kind of suggested that the other day, but I think it should be equal,
Yeah.
right? Because again, you want to make sure that a hate crime is a hate crime, right? When you commit a crime against someone simply because of the sort of group they belong to, then yeah, that should be punished, right? Although I did kind of make the point yesterday that yeah, many disabled people are not capable of defending themselves. So
Because
like
they're more sensitive over those who are acting like it
Yeah.
should be offered.
yeah, it's worse.
Punishment should be more for the disabled.
Yeah, there's an argument to be made there for sure because yeah, they're more vulnerable, like you say, right? They're more vulnerable. Okie dokie. How about we take a little break, and then when we come back, I'll just recap a few things from this documentary that I want to point out, and then we'll meet another person with a disability, but an entirely different, her experience is entirely different, okay? But we'll do that after the break, okay? So I'll see you very shortly. Okay, and we are back. So a couple of things I wanted to point out to you about Adam before we leave him. There we go. So some external and internal dimensions of privilege, right? We talked about this right at the end of the last unit, and again, we said that privilege kind of manifested itself externally in the dominant group norms and the structures of society. So can you think of some ways in which Adam might encounter external or structural privilege? Things, physical things in the world that are not designed for him, or that wouldn't work for him. Physical things about the world.
Like items?
Yeah.
Sunglasses.
Sunglasses might be a thing, right? I saw Adam wearing some reading glasses or whatever it was just before he went on stage. But yeah, glasses are going to be an issue, right? Number one, he doesn't see very well, right? He can't see out of one eye, and he's lost some of his vision out of the other eye. He does need glasses apparently sometimes, but is any pair of glasses going to fit on his head?
Might be hard to find one that goes
Yeah, it might be difficult to find glasses that suit him, right? Never mind, regular glasses, but sunglasses, right? Simple things that you and I can just, walk into any store with sunglasses and try a bunch on and find the ones that look coolest on us. Most of those aren't going to fit Adam, right? He's going to struggle with that a little bit. What else? Other physical things that Adam might struggle with.
Oh, hat. Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah, hats aren't going to be a good look for Adam, right? Because his head is quite large, right? And it's kind of a, non-symmetrical shape, right? So hats are going to be an issue for Adam, right? What else?
Hoodie then?
What's that?
Hoodie.
Oh yeah, hoodies maybe. Yep, hoodies for sure. But what about putting that hoodie on in the first place? Or a sweater, or a t-shirt?
Might be hard.
Yeah, right? His head's pretty big, right? It's going to be difficult to get it through. He's going to stretch out all of his shirts, right? So he probably has to look for shirts that, have a big enough neck or aren't going to, get all stretched out, right? Oh, that's a really good one. I hadn't thought of that, Kayla. Helmets.
Alright.
Yeah, what if Adam wants to go for a bike ride? It's a perfectly normal thing to do, right? But I don't know that he's going to be able to find a helmet that will fit his head, right? That's going to be a struggle. What else? What else might be a struggle? I'll give you a hint.
Face ID.
Yeah, Face ID on the phone. I wonder. Oh yeah, swimming goggles too. Yeah, that's a good one. I wonder if iPhone would recognize Adam's face as a face.
Oops.
Yeah. I wonder if it would. It might, but can you imagine how it would feel if it didn't? Like if he was trying to scan his face and iPhone was like, sorry, this is not a face. Yikes.
Feelings hurt.
Yeah, that'd feel pretty awful, I would think. I'm not sure if it would work with him. It might, and it might not. I assume it's not designed for, I assume the software knows what a face looks like. So, I wonder, right? I wonder. What about this, the construction of what's normal and not normal? The construction of what's normal and not normal. Here, let me give you an example of this. Oh, okay. The construction of what's normal and not normal. So,
Oh, that's him?
here are two human faces, right? You'll recognize Adam Pearson on the left. Who's on the right? Steve Carell, right, from
The
Office. Many things, right? Movies. He's the voice of Gru right, from Despicable Me, quite funny. Space Force, pretty funny in that too. Did anyone see Space Force? No, no. So Steve Carell, actor, comedian, writer, icon for being in The Office. So here we have two human faces, right? Now, from one perspective, we look and these are two very different looking faces, right? From another perspective, they're very similar, right? They both have two eyes, right? They both have a mouth and a nose and two ears. The face seems to be doing the same thing, right? The ears and the nose are holding up the glasses of these two individuals, right? Their eyes are looking out at the world. They both combed their hair in a very kind of, fashionable manner, I suppose. So in some ways, these faces do a lot of the same things. They're actually quite similar. But most people in society would look at the face on the left and say that that is not a normal face, right? And the face on the right, most people would say that is a normal face. In fact, some people find it a very handsome face, right? What do you think? Is he a good-looking guy? Steve? No? Not into Steve? I know some women who are very about Steve Carell, but
What does that mean?
it means they think he's hot.
Oh,
Yeah. Sorry.
roar.
Yeah, that
Oh.
little. I borrowed that from Homer Simpson. Have you ever heard Homer Simpson do that? When Marge is doing something and he's attracted to her, and he's like, "Oh, Marge!" You ever heard him do that? Yeah. So, anyway, Steve Carell's attractiveness aside, one face is not normal, one face is normal, but, and this is a rhetorical question, you don't have to answer it, but I'm just asking you to think about, where is the line, right? Where do we draw the line between what's a normal face and a not normal face, right? All of us have a face here in this room. All of our faces are unique, right? They're all different, but they're all normal faces, right? Society would look at us and say, yep, all of these are normal faces. But what makes one thing normal and one thing not normal, right? Both of these faces are kind of doing the same thing. They're serving the same function. But again, one is normal and one is not, right? And so, again, I'm not asking you to answer it, but just think about where the boundary is, right? Where does a face become not normal, right? And where does it become normal? Seeing as, again, we all have different faces and unique faces. Right? Also, these internal and attitudinal effects, right? So we saw a little bit of this in the documentary, the idea that some people felt superior to Adam or to Dan or to Lucas or to Hayden, right? And look at number 3, the lack of humility from limited knowledge of the minoritized group. You remember when he went around and was asking people, do you know what disableism is? Do you know what disableism is? And most people didn't know, right? Did they seem too bothered by it? No, they were like, yeah, he's like, do you know what disableism is? And they're like, no, not really. Like, can you imagine somebody saying that about racism? Do you know what racism is? No. It's almost difficult to imagine somebody being so, like, casual about racism and just like, yeah, no, whatever. Do you know anything about Indigenous people in Canada? Not really. Right? It's difficult to imagine people being that kind of relaxed, but here with disableism, they're like, oh yeah, I don't really know much about it. And again, because they don't feel, they don't feel concerned that they don't know anything about, people with disabilities or people with facial disfigurements. And again, a lot of people, again, privilege is invisible, right? We get to walk down the street every day and nobody really looks at us, right? For the most part, or at least not like they look at Adam, right? Nobody sees me and does a double take, right? Nobody sees me standing at the SkyTrain and says to their friend, dude, you've got to look at this. Turn around, you got to look at this, dude. Nobody does that, right? We have the privilege of kind of anonymity, right? Nobody really looks at us in that way, right? Nobody, walks up to us and tells us to do things or takes pictures of us without our consent, right? Or says, hey, I know you, give me a hug, because they happen to see us on TV, right? We don't have to kind of worry about those sorts of things, right? People sit next to us on the bus or on the SkyTrain, right? Which I'm sure none of us really like because I don't know about you, I like my elbow room. And especially during COVID, I prefer people don't sit beside me. But, for Adam, how does that feel every day when nobody sits anywhere near him, right? I guess he always has lots of elbow room, which is nice, but how does that feel every day to not have that, right? To not have people want to sit by you. And again, we have the ability to, sit on a train and people don't really take notice of us, right? They'll sit behind us, they'll sit in front of us, they'll sit beside us. Doesn't matter, right? We have that kind of privilege, right? People just take for granted that we're a normal person, right? Whereas Adam has to kind of prove that he's a normal person to people, right? Which again isn't right, but sometimes it's the way things are. So this kind of, I want to do one more thing with this kind of external and internal dimensions, right? So, sorry, I'm just going to back up a little bit. The integration of dominant group norms, the construction of what's normal and not normal, and then also sometimes people's feelings of superiority or their kind of lack of humility, and of course the invisibility of privilege, okay? So, and to do this, I want to show you, sorry, I'm jumping around a lot. I want to show you a quick TED Talk by a woman named Sinead Burke. And so Sinead is from Ireland. That's why her first name is spelled in such a strange way. I don't know why they don't just spell names the way they sound. But Sinead Burke here will talk a little bit about her experience, and we'll see again how society is designed for the dominant group, right? It's designed for people with no disabilities, right? So she'll talk about a few external or structural elements of privilege, and then she'll talk about some internal or attitudinal ones, okay? So as we watch and as we listen, I just want you to keep your ears and eyes open for those things, okay? Cool? Okay. Online people, the questions and the link are in Microsoft Teams. We're going to watch this and then we'll come back, okay? So we'll see you very, very shortly. All right. So this is an interesting talk because Sinead points out a number of external or structural dimensions of privilege that that are interesting to discuss, because again, Sinead would fit into the category of having a disability, or at least she would be disabled by her environment, right? So everything kind of works, right? She can walk, and her hands and her eyes and her ears, her body works, in a normal way, whatever that means. But she still struggles with the environment, right? What kind of things does she struggle with? Yeah. Yeah, everything's too high, right? The sink is too high, the soap is too high. She can't really see herself in the mirror because that's too high. Those hand dryers are probably too high for her too, right? She probably isn't tall enough to kind of put her hands into them, right? What else is an issue in there?
Traveling at the airport.
Oh, traveling at the airport is generally awful for everybody. But go ahead.
Maybe everything made of this for like normal bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. Things are just not made for someone who's 3 feet tall, right? She was wheeled through the airport in a wheelchair, right? But she doesn't need a wheelchair. It's just that your flight is always at the furthest gate from wherever you are, right? And she's got short legs, right? It's a long walk for us, right? How many ever walk to your gate and you're like when am I going to get there, right? And yeah, she's quite small, right? It's a much longer walk for her. What happens when she goes through security?
She can't lift her bags.
Yeah, right? Her bags are too heavy, and where's the roller where they send it through the x-ray machine? It's like this high, right? For her, that's at eye level, right? Can you imagine having to take your bags and lift them up to eye level? Right? That's very difficult. What other things does she struggle with? Clothes, right? Yeah, huge issue, right? She's child-sized, right? But is she a child? No, right? I think in this, I think she might be in her early 30s in this TED Talk, but don't quote me on that, I'm not sure. But does she want to dress like a child? No? Do any of you? No, right? You don't want to shop in the children's wear department. You want to wear cool stuff, right? You want to wear cool clothes. And she wants to look sometimes sophisticated, right? She wants to wear nice clothes and nice shoes, right? And she's going to really struggle to find something in her size because she's outside of normal, right? She's outside of that normal range. What else is she going to struggle with? Yeah, right? She orders the coffee, and where do they put it? Yeah, Tim Hortons is bad for that too, right? They put the lid on, but it's like this high, right? The platform is this high. Like, there's no way that someone like Sinead can reach that, right? And she can't really even be seen, right, going into Starbucks because the case is too high, right? And she's kind of hidden behind it. So that's embarrassing, right? If she can't close the lock in the bathroom, what does she have to do?
Ask a stranger.
Yeah, ask someone to stand guard. Does that sound comfortable to you? Especially if you got to do number 2, right? Do you really want someone standing outside the door? Like, oh my God, how awkward is that, right? But this is Sinead's, experience, right? Is that, she, the simple thing of going into a public bathroom, there's all kinds of challenges, right? And even in a accessible bathroom, right, or a bathroom for wheelchair users, that doesn't work for her either. Why not? What doesn't work about those accessible handicap bathrooms? Yeah, toilet's too high, toilet's too big, right? Can you imagine having to go to a toilet, having to like climb onto a toilet that's this high? right? Dangerous, right? Disgusting, right? I don't know about you, but I don't want to touch public toilets any more than I have to,
Yeah.
right? And yet, she almost has to like crawl up on top of one and hopefully not fall in, right? That sounds dangerous, and can you imagine the embarrassment of falling into the toilet, right? Like, if you, yeah, like nobody wants that to happen. So, yeah, like these are just simple things, right? The airport, the coffee shop, shopping for clothes, going to the bathroom while you're at the mall, right? All of these things are barriers to her, and they're things that are invisible to us, right? We don't think about any of that, right? If we go to a public washroom, if we go clothes shopping, I mean, finding things that fit is sometimes a bit of a challenge, but still, not like, Sinead could go to the mall and find nothing that fits her, except maybe in the children's wear department, right? That must be frustrating, right? And difficult. What about the internal stuff? Most of this is structural because she's talking about design, but there's some. Is there any? Well, maybe there's not so much. She did mention that people take pictures of her. Did she say every single day? Almost every single day. Yikes. Why do people do that, I wonder? Right? They have no shame. Yeah, I think we've kind of agreed it's rude to take pictures of people without their consent, right? That's not appropriate, right? And yet, not only has it happened to her, but it happens to her almost every day, right? And purely because she's a little person, right? Yeah. But not everybody's.
Not everybody is nice to help them. Not everybody is going to smile and like be kind with her.
Yeah.
So she did mention that she feels bad to sometimes like to ask people because not everybody does that.
Yeah, you kind of you have to expose yourself a lot more, right? You have to depend on people being nice and helping you, right? Either with the coffee or the luggage or the bathroom, right? You have to continually be asking people, "Oh, please help me," right? Because this environment, how things are designed don't work for me, right? Yeah, and it's interesting, and we're almost out of time here, so maybe it's the last thing I'll say, but consider, we said that people with disabilities can have disabilities in all kinds of different ways, and this is just two people, right? And again, Adam and Sinead are going to have certain challenges that other people don't have, but other people are going to have challenges that Sinead and Adam don't have, right? And so how do we kind of design, or think about our world when there's so many people that it doesn't really work for, right? And I had these things. You've probably seen how the curb kind of goes down, right? So that people with wheelchairs or walkers, or even just people who, don't walk very well, can very easily walk onto the street, right? But these have only been required in city design for, 30 years or so. And so prior to 30 years, the curbs were straight up, right? And if you're using a wheelchair, even crossing the street is a challenge because you can't get off the curb, or if you do manage to get off the curb, you can't get back on again and you're stuck on the street, right? Buses, right? We see that buses are now, they operate for people in wheelchairs and things like that, right? The ramp comes down. Sometimes the bus itself kind of kneels, right? It kind of goes down. But that wasn't always the case either, right? I don't know what it's like in your home countries, but when I was younger taking the bus, you had to go up the stairs onto the bus, right? And if you're someone who's in a wheelchair, or if you're using a walker, or even if you're someone like Sinead, right? Going up those stairs can be a challenge because the stairs are quite high and Sinead is not. Think about the seats on the bus now, where if you're a bigger person, those chairs might not work for you, right? They might be too small. They're actually almost a little too small for me. I kind of feel like squished in them because they're just a little small. But if I weighed, 300 or 400 pounds, those chairs might be really small. Right? And so, again, there are some accommodations made for people with disabilities, but lots of things in our environment are not designed for, they're not designed for everyone, right? And again, all of those things are, for the most part, invisible to us, right? Because they're not obstacles, right? We go shopping, we get coffee, we take the bus, we take the train, we go to the airport and struggle like everybody else at the airport, but we don't really see the obstacles that people with disabilities encounter, right? They're invisible, right? Because we have privilege in that regard, right? Our society is designed for people like us. Okie dokie, good people. That's all for today. You can pack it up. I hope you have a nice afternoon. Stay warm, stay dry, and I'll see you tomorrow, okay?